Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 2024 World Chess Championship match between the champion Ding Liren from China and the challenger Gukesh from India. This is round number 4, and the score is currently 1.5, 1.5. Ding won the first game of the match, which was an epic way to begin things, given all the narratives prior to the match. But Gukesh struck back in game 3 with a pretty nice win with the white pieces. Then they had a day of rest, which also happened to be Thanksgiving here in the States. Today, Ding gets the white pieces, and he's looking to strike back. That's the introduction. 40 seconds. Pretty good, right? I feel like, you know, my introductions recently have been 2 to 3 minutes of me telling you about what's coming up, but you already know. We've got the board. We've got Chessly 2.0 on the way. So let's just jump into this. And if you don't know about Chessly 2.0, watch the previous recap so I don't talk about it for 2 more minutes and make people annoyed. Ding opens the 4th game of the match with knight f3. Knight f3 is fine. It's a totally reasonable move. But all the top players have access to deep and powerful cloud computers. So they spend most of their time trying to analyze deep lines. First, Ding played e4, Gukesh responded with e5. It was an Italian, that was in game 2. But this time, Ding plays knight f3, d5, and like now, you know, he can play d4. He can play a pure ready with g3. He can play an e3 system followed by some sort of c4. I predicted before this game he would play in English, but he goes here, and he does play e3, knight f3, e3. This is a pretty common trend in recent years among 25 and 2600 ELO grandmasters because it's just very easy to play with white. You play c4, you play b3. I actually have an English course coming out on Chessly on the relaunch in a couple weeks, and you will get an English system with knight f3, e3. I mean, it's a very nice system. But at the high level, everybody knows everything. It's really hard to get a game. Gukesh plays knight f6, and now Ding plays the next surprise, which is b3. That's pretty wild. Knight f3, e3, b3. I mean, I feel like the last time this was played in a world championship match was like 1920. I'm not sure this was ever played in a world championship match. Somebody will have to find and put it in the comment section, all right? Either on YouTube or, hey, I've been posting some of these on Facebook too, but the ready, you know, Larson ready fusion is just like, it's not a cutting edge way to get a big advantage. And yet it makes Gukesh spend 5 minutes. I mean, Gukesh deciding should he play e6, c5. He plays a reverse London. This just goes to show you that the London system, even with the black pieces, is a perfectly solid and viable choice. Ding plays bishop e2, which is a very meta move. It's a response to bishop to f5. And the idea of bishop to e2 is that if black plays e6, suddenly white has knight h4. And this bishop is stuck. The bishop is controlled if bishop e4, white plays d3, and then takes. And basically gets the 2 bishops. Gukesh wasn't born yesterday. He was born like 18 years and a couple of months ago. So he plays h6. Now, to the untrained eye, a move like this early on just doesn't make any sense. But basically, black is trying to save his bishop and not commit this pawn. But now, because black did not commit this pawn, white plays the super edgy move, bishop to a3. I mean, this just looks like 500 ELO chess, right? I mean, what is this? This is like when you first learn your bishops can go that far. So you're like, oh, I'm going to move my bishop that far. Bishop a3 just looks like a mouse slip. It's not, though. The idea is that black actually struggles to move the e-pawn. Like, if black moves the e-pawn, now I take, and black loses the right to castle. You got to take with the king. It's not horrendous, but it's something. And that's all you need in a world championship match. And Gukesh spends 7.5 minutes on this move, knight bd7. Obviously, he plays it because he's developed the bishop. The other idea of knight bd7 is he wants to defend his bishop with the knight so that he can move his e-pawn, take back here, and then bring the knight back to d7. Ultimately, it takes 1, 2, and 3 moves, but it's a completely solid choice, and it's a very, very good choice for Gukesh. Ding castles. Gukesh plays e6. Ding captures the bishop, and now this plan has been implemented. In a shocking turn of events, black is totally fine losing all this time because this position is completely solid. And he's going to move his knight and castle. That's the idea. Now, the only way really here to put any pressure on black is to play c4 and maybe d4. But white gave up the dark squared bishop, right? So you're not going to have that bishop patrolling the whole diagonal. Ding does, in fact, play c4. Gukesh does, in fact, move the knight from f8 back to d7. And he's just going to castle his king. So Ding plays this line, which kind of has like a little wrinkle to it. Gukesh is like, I don't really care about your line. And now Ding spends 18 minutes. He spends 18 minutes developing the knight after building up a 13-minute time advantage. I'm not really too sure what he was thinking about here, but you're going to see he implements a plan which he could have implemented pretty quickly. Another option here is this interesting move, queen c1. To put the queen on b2, literally. And the queen just sort of chills here. It's the new bishop, except it's way more powerful. It also supports vertical play. And, you know, you can play a handful of things. You can put the knight on c3 after that. You can also play maybe d3, knight d3, knight d2, put some rooks over here and just start advancing. Another option is you can take on d5 and then try to use the c file. So maybe Ding was deciding between all those choices, but now he's down on time. And Gukesh just castles, right? I mean, his play is pretty straightforward. Now Ding opts to take on d5, and we get this position. So again, here Ding could have played this queen c1 idea first. He could have played knight c3. He could have taken on d5 and played b4 and queen b3. He could have played some d3 setup. He had a lot of choices. He opts for this one, and now this idea b4. I actually had a game in a recent over-the-board tournament against against Jurabek Hamrakulov. If you follow my Road to GM series, if you don't, you should follow my Road to Grandmaster series. I'm mostly saying that to the Facebook folks, because they might have not seen much of me before. But here on YouTube, you know, I've been here a while. But yeah, on YouTube, if you've also not seen, you know. But yeah, I had a move against Jurabek, Uzbek Grandmaster, and it was sort of like advancing on the queen side like this. So b4 is a very interesting idea. And Gukesh sets up like this because obviously, you know, the pawn chain is nice. They all defend each other. Fun fact, this is the 4th game of the World Championship match. They have played a combined 100 moves. In no game has Black's b7 pawn moved. You talk about that for a fun fact. They just hate the b7 pawn. Every other piece has gotten a turn, but not the b7 pawn. And so now Ding here plays very inspired chess. Okay, like everything here that Ding is doing, knight c3, the take on d5, b4, it's not much. But to be honest with you, chess at the high level is always hovering around equality. It ain't much, but it's an honest day's work. And so here, he's going to expand on the queen side, right? And then he's going to try to create some weaknesses. In the long term, this is kind of what white wants, okay? I'm just going to make a couple of like very obvious moves. White wants to play a6 because it softens up black's position. If black plays a6, they stop us from advancing, but they weaken their dark squares. So the long-term plan is something like knight to a4, and then let's say, you know, black for some reason just like falls asleep. Now we can maybe even take with the pawn, and then we're going to put pressure on this. We're going to jump in the knight there somehow. That's sort of the play here. Ding plays knight d4, great move, pushes the bishop backwards, and now queen b3. Very inspired play. All right, this is everything you want to see. A nice bounce back from yesterday after yesterday's defeat, and he's playing relatively quickly. I mean, I'm not going to say he's playing at light speed, but relatively quickly. Now, also here, Gukesh has many options. He can play a6, stopping white's advance. He can even strike back at the advance, although I'm not so sure how human this is. Like, this is kind of a difficult move to play. He can also just play a waiting move. Ultimately, he centralizes his knight. But to be honest with you, knight e5 is a peculiar move. And he spent 20.5 minutes on it. What I don't understand about knight e5 is, what is the idea if white goes f4? First of all, if white goes f4 now, and second of all, if white goes f4 in the future, is he gonna put the knight on g6? I don't understand as much chess as these guys do, but this looks kind of weird. And I don't know, maybe Ding can just keep playing a4, but maybe the knight is going to go to e7 and then f5. I mean, to be honest with you, Gukesh is probably a genius. Like, he's probably like, I don't care if f4 happens because I'm going to rotate and then trade the knight on the f5 square. Totally reasonable. Yeah. And then, you know, white's not going to go here because that looks ridiculous. You're going to weaken your king a lot. Yeah, but Ding plays a4. Now, why Ding spends 14 minutes on a4? I mean, it seems like a pretty clear plan. Ding, like, Gukesh here spending time on a5, rook e8, knight e5, all kind of makes sense to me. Ding spending 14 minutes here when, like the whole position is designed to play a4 is what I'm not criticizing. I'm just sort of confused as a spectator. I guess I'm thinking, like, did he spend a lot of time on this move? What was he calculating here? But he, because I sort of want to see him just play faster. I mean, considering in the third game he ultimately lost on time, as a spectator of the game, I'm like, I hope he just plays a little faster. But a4 is played, and again, Gukesh has multiple options here, but he plays rook c8. Rook c8, is purely designed to get out of there and try to create counterplay on the center. And Ding plays a5. He follows up a long think with a4 with a pretty short think, and now he wants to play a6. He's going to arrive in Gukesh's position and mess things up. Again, if a6, you're playing knight a4, you're getting to the dark squares, and you have a pretty pleasant advantage. Yeah, but Gukesh is very principled. He plays b6. The knight on e5 defends the pawn on c6. And obviously, if the rook wasn't there, f4 would simply be picking up a pawn. And now we have the critical moment of the game. So Ding's options here are attack the knight, take the pawn, attack the rook, and anything else. If you take the pawn, black is going to take back with the pawn. If you take back with the queen, after rook a6, you just are much worse because I go here and I win this pawn. So we would get this. And, if you wait too long, black will suddenly get c5 and the entire momentum of the game changes. So seeing as though c5 is coming, white needs to act now, okay? White can play f4. The problem now with f4 is that Gukesh has a move he didn't have before, which is knight c4. You see, when knight e5 first happened a few moves ago, you couldn't put the knight on c4 because you would just lose a pawn. It didn't make any sense. But with Gukesh's move rook c8, with Gukesh's move rook c8, now f4, this is fine because of c5. So the incoming threat of pawn to c5 kind of scared Ding here, but bishop a6 is a great move. The point is that, Gukesh obviously saw this and he simply thought rook c7. But now white can play f4. And you might say, Levy, what? You literally just told me knight c4. Yes, here's the difference. There is no longer c5 because of knight b5. You induce the rook to come forward, and now you can't play this as easily. Okay, after rook d7, pawn takes, queen takes, there's like bishop d3, there's some complicated lines, but it's a game, and actually Ding is up 2 pawns. Like, he's up 2 pawns, man. The position's still equal because, white can play knight a7 and lose a rook, actually. I mean, it's kind of an insane position, but the point is that if you play bishop a6 and then follow it up with f4, totally different story. Totally different story. Black might go back to d7 and is trying to play for c5, but even if you retreat now, you improve the position for white. The knight is out of the middle of the board. And if you play f4 knight g6, and then you, trade or something, and even here if you back up, black's pieces are a little bit silly, just a little bit silly. And now if black plays c5, the center gets a little bit weaker, right? So knight b5, b takes, knight f3. I mean, it's a game, But bishop a6 is the energetic response, and bishop a6 is a clear antidote to knight c4. The problem with knight c4 is that you take, and there's c5, and if pawn takes or something, this knight has to leave, and then black gets this fork, which these players see. You might not see it. I'm not insulting you. I'm just saying chess is hard. You have to calculate a lot of things, but they see it. But in this position, rather than playing bishop a6, rather than playing pawn takes b6, remember, the last time Ding had white, he got to a position, and he sort of just made a draw. And he plays knight to f3. Knight to f3 after 12 minutes, retreating from the center, trying to trade off this knight. But knight f3 is almost effectively a draw offer. I mean, I know that's insane. There's a rule in this event. You cannot offer your opponent the draw before the 40th move. It's move 16. Knight f3 is essentially a draw offer. Basically saying, all right, you sufficiently stabilized. You've got c5 on the way. Knight f3. Gukesh is like, okay, knight takes, bishop takes. Gukesh still has to play a couple of accurate moves to potentially secure the result. Obviously, you know, he can't, for example, take on a5. That's a horrendous move because white takes with the rook and now just has a target. It's like little things like this we take for granted, but Gukesh just moves his d-pawn forward. The thing is, black had a weak queenside, right? Like, black's queenside was going to be the question mark of the game. And now he gets rid of one of his pawns. And now he's going to get rid of white's bishop. And he's a concrete player, you know? And maybe here, there are still some little moments of pressure you can put on these pawns by white. You can bring your rooks. But at this level of the game, it's simply not going to happen. And so we get pawn takes b6, pawn takes b6, and Ding offers another trade. And Gukesh offers a trade of his own, right? And the boys are just bringing their pieces to the middle of the board. Now, for anybody confused, like, you should still play out positions like this because, you know, it sort of helps you practice good habits. Like, notice how neither of them are doing anything crazy, moving their pawns a million squares. And it's just queens and rooks. It's just heavy pieces on the board. Knights and bishops have been traded. I'm not insulting their weight. I'm just saying queens and rooks are called the heavy pieces. White plays h3 because even though you're the world champion, it's never too late to get back rank checkmated. And, you know, it's good. Ding is a good role model for chess players worldwide. There's no back rank checkmates. And Gukesh is like, well, it's time to trade off one of my pawns. Now, what's funny about this position is this is a pass pawn, meaning it has no pawns preventing its passage. But actually, it's a liability for black, if anything. I mean, it's kind of an asset, but it's really just sort of standing around waiting to get captured. Now, the funny thing about endgames like this, it's important to have what's called theoretical endgame knowledge, okay? A 4-on-3 pawn endgame is going to be a win for the person with 4 pawns. Almost all the time at almost all levels. Very, some exceptions. With rooks on the board, a 4-on-3 endgame on the same side is a draw 99% of the time at this level. I bet you didn't know that. With rooks, it's just a draw. With queens, it's more winnable, but it's a draw. Like, it's more winnable marginally, but it's a draw. But in a pawn endgame, with 4-on-3, it's probably winning. I mean, like, you gotta do it the right way, but there's a very, very good chance you can win it. Whatever I said earlier, you know, it might be a little bit less than that, but you get my point. Now we get rook c1, we get queen e5, and listen, at this level, you know, nobody's gonna do anything too crazy. Although here Gukesh spent a long time and played f5, and not a huge amount of time, but I mean, f5 doesn't even, I don't even understand this move. I also don't understand putting the rook here. Like, you know, black can go rook c8 and literally spend the rest of the game moving the rook up and down the c-file like a little water slide. Like, you don't have to do anything special. But okay, Gukesh plays rook d5 and f5, fine. He has this 4th rank blockade. And absolutely nothing happens. They trade the queens, and ultimately they repeat moves and make a draw. I don't know what's going on, man. This is a weird World Championship match. It's a really weird World Championship match. You know, we come into game 1, Gukesh has white, he plays e4, he plays into the French, obviously shows some nerves. Ding plays quite well, wins with the black pieces. After not winning for 300 days. Game 2, Ding with white plays e4. They get kind of interesting in Italian game, and then Ding just kills the game off into a draw when he absolutely didn't need to. Gukesh wins with white in game 3 after Ding gets his bishop trapped. And now in game 4, Ding plays this, which is definitely worth a shot and actually led to a very unique position. But, like, you know, and then he was playing very, very inspired, very energetic chess. And the moment that Gukesh made his biggest inaccuracy, like 0.3, but he allows bishop a6 followed by f4, which just gives white a pretty energetic plan. The moment that it happens, instead of that, Ding is like, well, there's counterplay on the way. You know what? Knight f3. It's a weird World Championship match. Listen, I'm not one of these. I'm not trying to be one of these sportscasters that didn't play the sport at this level and is on television criticizing the players. That is not what I am trying to do. And listen, Gukesh did nothing wrong in this game. I'm just saying it's a weird World Championship match. Like, my own coach, all right, tells me, don't move knights out of the center of the board if you don't have to. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't know, man. It's a weird match. I think Ding is just happy to stabilize today because he lost yesterday, and I think that's just generally good protocol. If you lose a game of chess, try not to lose the next one. But now Gukesh gets white again, and it's 2-2. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. It's a strange match. It's been a weird match, you know. But I'll see you all for round number 5 tomorrow, and the day after that. Is VIP launch for Chessly 2.0. So you will know if you're a VIP. We will contact you with your Chessly email. And if you're a Plus subscriber, check your email on December 1st. Sounds good? Fantastic. See you all for round number 5. Get out of here.